The Black Hawk helicopter swooped low over the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, its rotors slicing through the pre-dawn darkness. Inside the cramped cabin, bathed in the dull red glow of interior lights, a young woman worked frantically over the body of a fallen soldier. Blood coated her hands, her uniform, even her face, but her movements remained precise, controlled. "Losing pressure," she shouted over the roar of the engines. "Need more light." Someone angled a flashlight closer as she inserted a chest tube with practiced efficiency. The wounded SEAL's eyes fluttered open, momentarily locking with hers. "Got you, Cooper," she said. "Stay with me." The helicopter lurched violently as it took evasive action against incoming fire. The young medic never flinched, never paused, working with the steady hands of someone who had done this a dozen times before. "Emily." The voice seemed to come from far away. "Emily Lawson." Reality snapped back into focus. The helicopter vanished. The blood disappeared. Emily Lawson stood frozen in the hallway of Fort Bragg's medical center, her small frame nearly swallowed by an oversized hoodie, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Your paperwork is complete," said the administrative clerk, extending a folder. "Report to Nurse Reynolds at 0800 tomorrow." Emily nodded, keeping her eyes downcast as she accepted the folder. At 24, she looked younger than her age, almost fragile. Nothing about her suggested special training or exceptional abilities. Nothing visible, anyway. "Thank you," she murmured, turning quickly toward the exit. Outside, Fort Bragg sprawled before her in the late afternoon sun. One of America's largest military installations, the base housed elite special operations units from Army Rangers to Delta Force. Emily walked briskly toward the temporary housing she'd been assigned, her shoulders slightly hunched as if attempting to make herself even smaller, less noticeable. She'd chosen this post carefully. A large medical facility with constant rotation of personnel. Easy to blend in, easy to disappear among the countless faces that moved through the base every day. A place where she could just be another military medic with standard training and an unremarkable record. No one would look twice at Emily Lawson here. That was the plan anyway. Jack Reynolds stood at the window of his small office, watching the petite figure cross the parking lot. At 67, with silver hair, cropped in a military cut he had maintained since the Reagan administration, Reynolds had long ago developed an instinct for recognizing certain types of soldiers. The quiet ones who carried more than standard issue equipment, the ones with shadows behind their eyes. The new medic, Lawson according to her file, had those eyes. Reynolds had seen them before in operatives returning from classified missions during the Cold War. In the faces of men who'd conducted operations that would never appear in history books. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Nathan Miller entered, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe. At 34, Miller had the hardened physique of the Navy SEAL he was, with 12 years of combat experience etched into the lines around his eyes. "Morning brief is set for 0700, Miller said. "Duran Anderson wants all hands on deck. We've got a convoy coming back from the border tomorrow, potential casualties." Reynolds nodded, his attention still on the retreating figure outside. "That our new transfer?" Miller asked, following Reynolds' gaze. "Emily Lawson, basic medical training at Fort Sam Houston, according to her file. Nothing remarkable." Miller tilted his head slightly. "But you think otherwise?" Reynolds turned from the window, a slight smile creasing his weathered face. "I've been doing this since you were in diapers, son. Some things you learn to spot." "Like what?" "The way she walks. Always positioned to see all entry points. The way her eyes scanned the room when she came in. 3 seconds and she'd mapped every exit. That's not basic medical training. That's something else." Miller shrugged. "Combat deployment, maybe. Lots of medics pick up those habits." "Maybe." Reynolds didn't sound convinced. "Guess we'll find out." Emily's assigned quarters were Spartan, but private, a small blessing. She placed her meager belongings in the dresser, movements efficient and methodical. From her backpack, she removed a worn photograph, stared at it for a long moment, then slid it beneath her mattress rather than displaying it. The small room had a single window overlooking the parade ground. Emily checked the locks twice, then positioned her bed to give her a clear line of sight to the door. Old habits, necessary habits. She sat on the edge of the bed, removed her boots, and closed her eyes. The memories came unbidden. The thunder of helicopter rotors, the metallic taste of fear, the weight of responsibility as she worked to save men who trusted her with their lives. "Not now," she whispered to the empty room. "Not here." Emily forced herself to focus on her breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. The technique had become second nature over the past 3 years, since that final mission when everything had gone catastrophically wrong. Tomorrow she would begin her new position. Just a regular medic with regular skills. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, nothing that would draw attention or questions. That was the plan. That was the only way to survive. The medical center hummed with morning activity as Emily reported for duty. The large facility served not only Fort Bragg personnel, but also veterans from surrounding communities. Staff moved with practiced efficiency, their conversations creating a background murmur, punctuated by occasional announcements over the PA system. "Lawson reporting as ordered, sir," Emily said, standing at attention before the nurse's station. Jack Reynolds looked up from his computer, studying her for a moment. "At ease. This isn't Ranger School." Emily relaxed marginally, her posture remaining straight, eyes focused slightly over Reynolds' left shoulder, the perfect military bearing of someone accustomed to inspection. "Your orientation packet is here," Reynolds said, sliding a folder across the counter. "You'll shadow Nurse Williams for the first week, then rotate through departments. Questions?" "No, sir." Reynolds studied her carefully. Close up, he could see the tension in her jaw, the careful control in her expression. "Combat experience?" he asked casually. A flicker of something, alarm, crossed her face before disappearing behind a neutral mask. "Some, sir. Standard deployments." "Where?" "Afghanistan, Kandahar province mostly." Reynolds nodded slowly. "I was there too, back in '84 during the Soviet occupation. Different wars, same mountains." Emily's eyes met his directly for the first time. "You were in Afghanistan in the '80s. Special Operations Medical Support. Back when we were arming the Mujahideen against the Russians. Not officially, of course." Reynolds smiled slightly. Ancient history now. Before Emily could respond, a tall, distinguished man in a white coat approached. "Dr. Anderson, this is our new medic, Emily Lawson," Reynolds said. "Emily, Dr. Robert Anderson, Chief of Surgery." Butter Anderson offered a perfunctory nod. "Welcome aboard, Lawson. We run a tight operation here. Excellence is expected, not rewarded. Clear?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied. "Good. Reynolds, we need to discuss the incoming casualties from the convoy. My office, 10 minutes. With that, Anderson strode away, white coat billowing behind him. Reynolds chuckled. "Don't mind him. Brilliant surgeon, terrible people skills. You'll get used to it." Emily nodded, clutching her orientation folder like a shield. "Come on," Reynolds said. "I'll introduce you to the team." Over the next few days, Emily settled into a routine, carefully maintaining her persona as a competent but unremarkable medic. She assisted with minor procedures, changed bandages, monitored vital signs, all with quiet efficiency that drew little attention. Her technique was solid, her bedside manner reserved but kind. What no one noticed was how she absorbed everything around her, how she memorized the layout of each treatment room, noted which cabinets held emergency medications, mentally calculated the time it would take to reach the helipad from any point in the facility. These were the automatic assessments of someone trained to operate in hostile environments to prepare for worst-case scenarios. On her fourth day, Emily was organizing supplies in one of the smaller treatment rooms when Nathan Miller appeared in the doorway. "Need a hand with the inventory?" he asked. "I've got it, thanks," Emily replied, not looking up from her checklist. Miller leaned against the doorframe, watching her methodical movements. "Reynolds says you served in Afghanistan." Emily's hand paused momentarily before continuing its task. "That's right." "Which unit?" 68 Whiskey, Combat Medic, attached to various infantry companies. "I was with SEAL Team 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq." Miller studied her reaction. "Rough country, Afghanistan, especially for medical personnel." Emily nodded noncommittally. "You know what's interesting about combat medics?" Miller continued conversationally. "You can tell the ones who've seen serious action by how they organize their gear. Everything in precise locations for quick access, just like you're doing now." Emily finally looked up at Ian, her expression carefully neutral. "Efficient organization saves time. That's basic training." "Sure is, but there's basic, and then there's—" Miller gestured to the perfectly arranged supplies. This level of precision isn't taught at Fort Sam Houston." Emily closed the cabinet, locking it with a decisive click. Was there something specific you needed, Sergeant Miller? Miller straightened from his relaxed posture. Just getting to know the new team member. We work closely together here, especially during emergencies. Good to know who has your back. I appreciate the welcome, Emily said, her tone professional but distant. If there's nothing else, I should finish this inventory. Miller nodded, his keen eyes missing nothing about her defensive posture. Sure thing. See you at the staff meeting. As he walked away, Miller couldn't shake the feeling that Lawson was hiding something significant. Reynolds' instincts were rarely wrong. The staff meeting took place in a conference room adjacent to the main treatment area. Emily sat in the back corner, positioning herself with a clear view of both exits. Dr. Anderson stood at the front, reviewing the week's cases and upcoming operations. Additionally, Anderson continued, Lieutenant Colonel Shepard has informed me that we'll be receiving specialized training next month on mass casualty response. All personnel will participate. William Shepard, the base's medical commander, nodded from his seat near Anderson. At 58, Shepard carried himself with the rigid posture of career military. His service in the Gulf War had left him with both decorations and a permanent limp. This training is mandatory, Shepard added, his voice carrying the natural authority of command. Recent intelligence suggests increased potential for attacks on military installations. We need to be prepared. Emily kept her expression neutral, but her mind raced. Mandatory training meant scrutiny evaluations, possible exposure of skills she was trying to conceal. Finally, Anderson concluded, we'll be conducting a readiness drill sometime in the next 2 weeks. Unannounced. Consider yourselves warned. As the meeting dispersed, Emily moved quickly toward the exit, hoping to avoid further conversation with Miller or anyone else who might ask questions. Lawson, Reynolds called, halting her retreat. A moment. Emily turned, maintaining her professional demeanor as Reynolds approached with a younger soldier beside him. This is Private First Class Jason Parker, Reynolds said. 19 first tour, just back from a patrol that made contact with hostiles. Dr. Anderson prescribed rest, but the kid's having trouble sleeping. Thought you might talk to him. Parker stood awkwardly, his young face marked by the unmistakable look of someone who'd recently discovered that war wasn't what recruitment posters promised. Emily recognized the haunted eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. Sir, I'm not qualified for psychological counseling, Emily protested quietly. Reynolds fixed her with a knowing look. Sometimes people just need to talk to someone who understands. Medbay 3 is empty. Take 15 minutes. Before Emily could object further, Reynolds walked away, leaving her with the young soldier. This way, she said reluctantly, leading Parker to the small examination room. Inside, Parker sat stiffly on the edge of the examination table, staring at his hands. They said I froze up, he finally said, voice barely audible. First time we took fire. Everyone was moving, responding, and I just couldn't. Emily remained standing, maintaining a careful distance. Fear is normal in combat situations. Not for soldiers. We're supposed to be trained for it. Training prepares your body. Nothing fully prepares your mind for the first time someone is actively trying to kill you. Parker looked up, surprised by her blunt assessment. The others didn't freeze. You don't know that, Emily said. You only know they moved. Many were probably terrified but functioning on autopilot from training. Were you scared, when you were deployed? The question hung in the air between them. Emily considered deflecting, giving some generic response about normal anxiety under fire. Instead, something about the raw vulnerability in Parker's face made her answer honestly. Yes, she said softly, more than you can imagine. Parker studied her, seeming to really see her for the first time. But you dealt with it. The brave ones aren't the ones who don't feel fear, Emily said, echoing words someone had once said to her. They're the ones who feel it and keep going anyway. They sat in silence for several moments before Parker spoke again. How do you make the memories stop when you're trying to sleep? Emily felt a tightness in her chest. How many nights had she lain awake, haunted by faces of men she couldn't save, by decisions that cost lives? You don't not completely, she admitted, but you learn to live with them, to make peace with what you can and can't control. Parker nodded slowly, something in her tone seeming to reach him where official psychiatric advice had failed. For a brief moment, Emily felt the satisfaction of connection, of having possibly helped someone struggling with the same demons that haunted her. Thanks, Parker said simply as he stood to leave. For not giving me some bullshit about how it gets easier. As he reached the door, he paused. You know, you don't seem like just a regular medic. Something about the way you talk about it. It's like you've seen more than most. Emily's expression closed immediately, the brief openness vanishing. Just doing my job. Private. Get some rest. After Parker left, Emily leaned against the examination table, breathing deeply to calm her racing heart. She'd said too much, revealed too much. A careless mistake she couldn't afford to repeat. Unknown to her, Jack Reynolds had observed the entire exchange through the small window in the door, noting both her momentary openness and the abrupt shutdown that followed. 2 days later, Emily was organizing patient files when the conversation at the nurse's station caught her attention. Operation Black Mountain, Reynolds was saying to Miller. Classified mission went sideways about 3 years ago. Entire special operations team wiped out except for one survivor. Emily's hands froze on the files, her body tensing involuntarily. Never heard about that one, Miller replied. You wouldn't have. Officially, it never happened. Unofficially, it was a disaster. Intelligence failure led a team right into an ambush. Someone leaked their position, their route, everything. Emily forced herself to continue filing, but her ears strained to catch every word. The survivor, Miller asked, never identified publicly. Rumor has it they disappeared after recovering. Couldn't handle the survivor's guilt, maybe, or something else. The metal filing cabinet closed with a louder clang than Emily intended, drawing both men's attention. She felt their eyes on her back as she hurriedly gathered the remaining files. Everything okay, Lawson? Reynolds called. Fine, sir, Emily replied, not turning around. Just clumsy today. She walked briskly from the room, files clutched to her chest, unaware that her reaction had confirmed Reynolds' suspicions. Back in the supply closet, Emily leaned against the shelves, struggling to control her breathing as memories flooded back. The mountains of Afghanistan, the ambush, the desperate fight to save her teammates as enemy fire rained down around them. The terrible decision to call an airstrike on their own position when it became clear they couldn't escape. And the aftermath. Waking up in a field hospital, the sole survivor, with questions she couldn't answer and a truth she couldn't tell. Operation Black Mountain, her last mission, the one that had taken everything from her. Later that afternoon, Emily was checking supplies in the pharmacy when a voice behind her made her jump. Specialist Lawson. She turned to find Lieutenant Colonel Shepard standing in the doorway, accompanied by a man she didn't recognize. Something about the stranger's crisp civilian suit and observant eyes set off warning bells in Emily's mind. Sir, she acknowledged, standing at attention. This is Captain James Walker, Base Security, Shepard said. He'd like a word. Walker stepped forward, his penetrating gaze assessing her with professional detachment. Specialist Lawson, we're conducting routine background verifications on all medical personnel with access to controlled substances. Standard procedure. Nothing about this felt standard to Emily, but she maintained her composure. Of course, sir. Your file indicates you completed medical training at Fort Sam Houston, followed by deployments to Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And prior to your enlistment, 2 years of pre-med at University of Texas, sir. I enlisted rather than completing the degree. Walker nodded, making a note in a small black notebook. Your previous commanding officer was Captain Thomas Richards, a trap. Emily had studied her cover story thoroughly. No, sir. Captain Michael Jameson, then Major Lisa Torres after reassignment. Walker's expression revealed nothing, but Emily sensed she'd passed some kind of test. Thank you, Specialist. That will be all for now. He handed her a card. If you remember any additional details about your service that might not be reflected in your file, please contact me directly. After they left, Emily examined the card, direct line to Fort Bragg Security Division. She slipped it into her pocket, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Someone was asking questions. Someone was looking closer. That evening, Emily sat alone in the base chapel, one of the few places on the installation where she could find genuine solitude. The simple wooden space was empty at this late hour. The colored light from stained glass windows dimmed to shadows in the fading daylight. She wasn't religious, not anymore, not after everything she'd seen. But the quiet peace of the chapel provided a refuge from the constant vigilance required everywhere else. Didn't take you for the praying type, came Reynolds' voice from the doorway. Emily stiffened but didn't turn. I'm not. just needed some quiet. Reynolds walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He sat in the pew beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. Captain Walker isn't just routine security, he said without preamble. He's counterintelligence, been investigating a security breach involving classified operations. Emily kept her face carefully blank. Why are you telling me this? Because he's looking at all personnel with combat experience in Afghanistan within specific timeframes. And because your reaction to Operation Black Mountain wasn't the response of someone hearing about it for the first time. Emily's heart pounded, but her training held. I don't know what you're talking about. Reynolds sighed suddenly, looking every one of his 67 years. I've been in this game a long time, Lawson. Worked with special operations units since before you were born. I know operational security, and I respect it. But I also know when someone's carrying a burden that's crushing them from the inside. He turned slightly to face her. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're hiding from, it followed you here. Walker won't stop digging. If there's something in your past that could compromise this facility or its personnel, now's the time to get ahead of it. Emily finally looked at him, her eyes hard with controlled fear. With all due respect, sir, you don't know what you're asking. Maybe not, Reynolds conceded, but I know the look of someone who's lost their entire team. I carried that same look for years after a mission in Afghanistan in '86. Soviet special forces ambushed us. I was the only one who made it back across the border. The revelation hung between them, a shared experience few could understand. How did you live with it? Emily asked the question, escaping before she could stop it. One day at a time, found purpose in teaching others what I'd learned. Made sure those deaths weren't for nothing. Reynolds stood slowly. Whatever happened on Black Mountain, it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. But secrets have a way of surfacing, usually at the worst possible moment. He placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. Think about it, Lawson. My door's open if you need it. After Reynolds left, Emily remained in the chapel, turning his words over in her mind. For 3 years, she'd lived in the shadows, hiding her true identity, her true skill bearing the trauma of that final mission beneath layers of carefully constructed anonymity. But Reynolds was right about one thing. The past had followed her to Fort Bragg. The question was whether she could continue outrunning. The emergency klaxon shattered the pre-dawn silence at exactly 0300 hours. Emily was awake and moving before the second wail, pulling on her uniform with practiced speed. 3 years of hiding hadn't dulled her instincts or her response time. She reached the medical center simultaneously with other staff members, all rushing toward the trauma bays as announcement speakers crackled to life. This is not a drill. Multiple casualties inbound. ETA 5 minutes. All medical personnel report to stations. Repeat, this is not a drill. Dr. Anderson was already in the main trauma bay issuing rapid-fire instructions. Explosion at the checkpoint 5 miles out. Multiple American casualties plus local civilians. First helicopter landing in 3 minutes, 2 more right behind it. Emily moved to her assigned station, laying out supplies with methodical precision. The familiar rhythm of emergency preparation settled her nerves, pushing personal concerns aside as professional training took over. Reynolds appeared beside her, his experience calm, a steadying presence amid the controlled chaos. You ready for this, Lawson? Yes, sir, she replied automatically. The distant thump of helicopter rotors grew louder. Reynolds gave her a measuring look. Remember your training, but trust your instincts. Sometimes they know things we don't. Before Emily could respond, the trauma bay doors burst open as the first casualties arrived. The next hours became a blur of activity, triaging wounded, assisting with procedures, moving efficiently between tasks as more injured arrived in waves. She maintained her cover, performing only procedures appropriate for her supposed level of training, even as her mind recognized opportunities for more advanced interventions. It was agonizing to hold back when she knew she could do more, but exposure would mean the end of her carefully constructed anonymity. Then came the case that would change everything. A civilian male approximately 30 years old with shrapnel wounds to the chest and abdomen. Initially conscious and stable, he suddenly deteriorated as Emily was checking his vital signs. He's crashing, called the medic monitoring him. Going into cardiac arrest. The medical team rushed to respond, beginning CPR, as Dr. Anderson shouted for emergency medications. But Anderson was in the middle of a critical surgery on another patient and couldn't leave. Miller was occupied with a soldier suffering severe leg trauma. The medic performing CPR looked up desperately. "We're losing him. I need someone who knows advanced cardiac life support." Emily hesitated, torn between self-preservation and her medical oath. The most qualified personnel were unavailable. Without advanced intervention, the man would die. In that moment of decision, all the careful planning of the past 3 years balanced against a single human life. The weight of that responsibility was familiar. She had faced it before on a mountainside in Afghanistan with the lives of her teammates in her hands. She had failed them then. She would not fail now. "I'll take over," Emily said, her voice suddenly different. Confident, authoritative, the voice of someone accustomed to command in crisis situations. Without waiting for permission, she stepped forward and began a series of advanced cardiac procedures that most of the regular medics had only read about in textbooks. Her hands moved with absolute precision, demonstrating years of specialized training and experience far beyond her supposed qualifications. "I need epinephrine atropine and get me the advanced airway kit," she ordered, her tone leaving no room for question or hesitation. The other medical staff scrambled to comply, too focused on the emergency to question why this quiet, unremarkable medic suddenly displayed the skills and authority of an elite combat physician. Emily worked with intense concentration, performing a complex procedure to address both the cardiac arrest and the underlying trauma causing it. Her movements were decisive, her assessment lightning fast, her technique flawless, the unmistakable skills of someone with extensive battlefield surgical experience. After 20 tense minutes, the cardiac monitor showed the return of a pulse. "We've got him back," Emily announced quietly. "He's stable for now, but needs immediate surgery." As the emergency subsided, Emily became aware of the unusual silence that had fallen over the trauma bay. Looking up, she found Dr. Anderson standing in the doorway, his expression one of complete bewilderment. Miller stood nearby, staring at her with newfound recognition. And in that moment, Emily Lawson knew her cover was blown. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled in an instant of critical decision. The skills she had hidden for 3 years were now on full display, raising questions she couldn't answer without revealing the truth about Operation Black Mountain and her real identity. The weight of those stares, confused, suspicious, awed, pressed down on her as she stepped back from the patient, allowing others to take over his continued care. She felt herself shrinking back into her protective shell, shoulders hunching, slightly eyes dropping to avoid contact. "Good work, Lawson," Dr. Anderson said, his voice filled with unasked questions. "That was exceptional." Emily nodded silently and began cleaning up the medical supplies, her movements once again careful and reserved. But everyone in that trauma bay had witnessed her transformation from quiet, unremarkable medic to one of the most skilled medical professionals they had ever seen. As she worked, Emily felt Miller's gaze following her, no longer curious but certain. Reynolds, too, watched her with knowing eyes that said more clearly than words, "Your secret is out." What happens now? The question echoed in her mind as dawn broke over Fort Bragg, illuminating a future suddenly filled with uncertainty and danger. She had saved a life tonight, but in doing so, had she destroyed her own chance at safety and anonymity? And if her true identity was discovered, how long before the secrets of Operation Black Mountain and the betrayal that had caused it came to light? Emily Lawson had survived the ambush that killed her team. She had survived 3 years in hiding. But as she felt the questioning stares of her colleagues, she wondered if she would survive the consequences of her moment of heroism. The next few days would provide the answer, an answer that would either offer redemption for her past failures or confirm her deepest fears about the conspiracy that had destroyed everything she once held dear. In the days following the emergency, Fort Bragg's medical center returned to its normal rhythms, but nothing was the same for Emily Lawson. She felt the weight of unspoken questions following her through corridors, lingering in the sudden silences when she entered rooms. Staff who had witnessed her performance during the crisis now looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Others, hearing only rumors, watched her with suspicion. Emily did her best to retreat back into anonymity, keeping her head down and her responses minimal. But the facade had cracked, and no amount of careful behavior could fully repair it. Dr. Anderson had said nothing further about her unexpected display of advanced medical skills, but his clinical gaze now followed her with analytical interest. Lieutenant Colonel Shepard's demeanor toward her had shifted from casual indifference to attentive scrutiny. Even the nurses and technicians treated her differently, deferring to her judgment in subtle ways they never had before. Only Jack Reynolds behaved as if nothing had changed, though his knowing eyes told a different story. He was giving her space, Emily realized. Space to decide what happened next. It was Miller who finally broke the unspoken standoff, approaching her as she restocked a supply cabinet at the end of her shift. "That was some impressive work during the crisis," he said without preamble. Emily continued organizing bandages, her movements deliberately measured. "Just did what needed to be done." "What you did," Miller said, leaning against the doorframe, "was perform a thoracostomy with concurrent cardiac massage while maintaining peripheral circulation through manual pressure point manipulation. That procedure isn't taught to combat medics. It's not even taught to most doctors." Emily remained silent. "In fact," Miller continued, "I've only seen it done twice before. Once during SEAL medical training by our unit's top combat surgeon, and once in the field by a Tier 1 medical operative attached to a classified strike team." His words hung in the air between them, an implicit question that demanded an answer. Emily finally looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Is there something you want to ask me, Sergeant Miller?" Miller studied her for a long moment. "Who are you really, Lawson? Because you're sure as hell not a regular combat medic with standard deployments in Afghanistan." The moment stretched between them, taut with tension. Emily had prepared for this confrontation since the emergency had rehearsed deflections and plausible explanations. But something in Miller's direct approach, the professional respect in his tone, made her hesitate. Before she could respond, the base alarm system erupted into wailing claxons. The overhead speakers crackled with urgent announcement. "Attention all medical personnel. Incoming casualties from convoy attack. Multiple critical. All hands report to stations." "This is not a drill." Miller's eyes remained locked with Emily's for a heartbeat longer. "We'll finish this conversation later," he said, then turned and sprinted toward the trauma bay. Emily followed, grateful for the interruption, but knowing the reprieve was temporary. The questions would still be waiting when the emergency ended, and sooner or later she would have to provide answers. The trauma bay had transformed into controlled chaos as medical staff prepared for incoming casualties. Dr. Anderson stood at the center, issuing rapid instructions as equipment was readied and stations prepared. "Convoy hit by IEDs and small arms fire near the Pakistani border," he announced grimly. 7 confirmed casualties, 3 critical. First chopper landing in 2 minutes. Reynolds appeared at Emily's side, his experienced calm, a steadying presence. "Emily," he said quietly, using her first name for the first time, "whatever happens today, remember that saving lives comes before protecting secrets." She met his gaze, understanding the implicit message. If critical patients arrived requiring skills beyond standard care, he expected her to use whatever abilities she possessed regardless of the questions it might raise. Before Emily could respond, Lieutenant Colonel Shepard strode into the trauma bay, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Change of plans," he announced. "The extraction zone is still hot. Enemy forces in the area, possible ambush still active. We're sending in a medical team by helicopter to stabilize the critical cases before transport." He scanned the room, his gaze settling on Miller. "Sergeant Miller, you'll lead the team. Take Specialist Turner and—" He paused, then deliberately added, "Specialist Lawson." Emily's stomach tightened. This wasn't a coincidence. Shepard was testing her, putting her in a situation that would force her to reveal more of her true capabilities. "Sir," Miller acknowledged. "Estimated time to wheels up." 10 minutes, Shepard replied. "Gear up and report to the helipad. Full combat medical kits. The area is not secure, so prepare accordingly." As the room dispersed into urgent activity, Reynolds caught Emily's arm. "Be careful out there," he said quietly. "Walker's been asking questions about you. He knows something's not right with your file." "Why are you telling me this?" Emily asked. "Because I've seen too many good soldiers destroyed by secrets and lies." Reynolds' weathered face was solemn. "Whatever you're hiding, I don't think it's because you're a threat to this base or its personnel. But Walker doesn't know that." Emily nodded, processing this new complication. "Thank you." Reynolds released her arm with a final warning. "Watch your back out there, and not just against enemy fire." The Black Hawk helicopter thundered over the rugged terrain of eastern Afghanistan, its powerful rotors fighting against turbulent mountain air currents. Inside, Emily sat rigid, her mind cycling between present danger and memories of the last time she'd flown into a combat zone. 3 years. 3 years since Operation Black Mountain. 3 years since she'd lost everything. Across from her, Miller checked his medical kit, his movements precise and practiced. Beside him, specialist David Turner, a young combat medic with eager eyes and limited experience, fidgeted with his helmet strap. 5 minutes to drop zone. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Be advised, we've received reports of continued small arms fire in the area. Quick in and out. Stabilize and load. No heroics. Emily felt a familiar calm settle over her, the focused readiness that came from extensive training and hard experience. Whatever complications awaited her back at base right now, her only mission was to save lives. That simplicity was almost comforting. Miller caught her eye, giving her a measuring look. You good, Lawson? I'm good, she replied and meant it. The helicopter banked sharply, descending toward a small clearing near where smoke rose from the ambushed convoy. As they neared the ground, Emily could see the wreckage. 3 vehicles ablaze, others damaged but intact. Soldiers maintained a defensive perimeter around the wounded, occasional muzzle flashes indicating ongoing engagement with the enemy forces. The moment the skids touched earth, they were moving, crouching low, and sprinting toward the makeshift casualty collection point as the helicopter lifted away to a safer holding pattern. A harried lieutenant met them at the perimeter, shouting over the din of sporadic gunfire. 3 critical, 4 walking wounded. The critical are behind that Humvee. Enemy on the ridge to the east, maybe 200 meters out. Miller nodded. Turner triage the walking wounded. Lawson with me on the criticals. They moved quickly to the Humvee where 3 soldiers lay on hastily deployed field tarps. Emily's medical assessment was automatic and immediate. 2 with multiple shrapnel wounds, bleeding heavily but stabilizable. The third, a sergeant with a chest wound, was in far worse condition. This one first, Miller said, kneeling beside the sergeant. The others can wait a few minutes. Emily joined him, already pulling supplies from her kit. One look at the wounded sergeant told her everything. Tension pneumothorax, probable internal bleeding, shock setting in rapidly. Standard field procedures wouldn't be enough. He needs a chest tube and possibly exploratory intervention, she said, falling naturally into the professional terminology of her true training. Miller's eyes flicked to hers briefly, noting the shift in her demeanor. Can you do it? It was a loaded question. Not just asking about her medical ability, but whether she was willing to further expose her true skills. Before Emily could answer, a burst of gunfire erupted closer than before. The lieutenant shouted from the perimeter, "They're advancing on our position. We've got 5 minutes max." "We won't get him to the base alive without intervention," Miller said urgently. "Lawson, if you can do something, now's the time." Emily made her decision. "I need light, steady hands on retraction and someone to maintain pressure on the femoral bleed while I work." Miller nodded, giving no indication of surprise at her taking command. "You've got it. Turner," he shouted. "Get over here. We need an extra pair of hands." As Turner joined them, Emily was already cutting away the sergeant's tactical vest and shirt, revealing the full extent of his injuries. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. This was no simple pneumothorax. The shrapnel had created a complex wound pattern that would require advanced battlefield surgery to repair. "Turner, maintain pressure here," she instructed, placing his hands on a pressure point. "Miller, I need you to assist with retraction and suction." Emily's transformation was complete now. Her movements sharp and precise, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to performing life-saving procedures under fire. Gone was any pretense of being a standard medic. This was a combat surgeon operating at the highest level of skill. She worked with extraordinary speed and precision, her hands steady despite the sound of gunfire intensifying around them. Inserting a chest tube, she drained the blood accumulating around the lung, then quickly identified and clamped a bleeding artery. "Pressure still dropping," Miller reported, monitoring the portable equipment. "I need to explore deeper," Emily decided. "There's another bleed somewhere." Turner's eyes widened. "In the field, that's beyond protocol." "He dies if I don't," Emily cut him off. "More light." As Miller angled the tactical flashlight, Emily made a precise incision, working with the calm efficiency that had once made her legendary among special operations teams. Within minutes, she had located and repaired a second arterial bleed, one that would have been impossible to detect without the exploratory procedure she'd performed. "Pressure stabilizing," Miller confirmed, a new respect in his voice. The lieutenant appeared beside them, crouching low. "Enemy closing in from the east ridge. Helicopters inbound for immediate extraction." 2 minutes. He's transportable now, Emily said quickly, closing and dressing the wound. Let's move. As they prepared the patients for evacuation, Miller caught her eye. Where did you really train Lawson? He asked quietly. Before she could answer, a burst of gunfire kicked up dirt just feet from their position. Later, Emily replied, helping lift the sergeant onto a stretcher. The extraction unfolded in a blur of shouted orders, rotor wash, and adrenaline. Loading the wounded onto the helicopter, they lifted off just as enemy fire intensified, bullets pinging off the helicopter's armored underside. Inside the swaying cabin, Emily continued monitoring the sergeant, making adjustments to keep him stable during the flight. Turner watched her with undisguised awe while Miller's expression had shifted from suspicion to professional respect. As the helicopter raced toward the safety of Fort Bragg, Emily knew there was no going back. Her cover, maintained so carefully for 3 years, had been irreparably blown. The only question now was what would happen when they landed, and whether the ghosts of Operation Black Mountain would finally catch up with her. The return to base brought no immediate confrontation. The emergency of stabilizing and treating the wounded took precedence over questions about Emily's identity and training. For hours, she worked alongside the medical team, her advanced skills now deployed openly as they fought to save the injured soldiers. By the time the last patient was stabilized and moved to recovery, exhaustion had settled over the medical center. Staff departed in quiet groups, the day's intensity leaving little energy for conversation or speculation. Emily found herself alone in the supply room, mechanically restocking emergency kits, her mind replaying the field operation and calculating the inevitable consequences. Her actions had saved the sergeant's life. Of that, she had no doubt. But they had also exposed skills that could only have come from specialized training far beyond her cover story. You should rest, came Reynolds' voice from the doorway. You've done enough for one day. Emily continued her inventory. I'm almost finished here. Reynolds stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Anderson and Shepard are meeting with Captain Walker right now. Your field performance has raised questions that can't be ignored anymore. Emily's hand stilled. I know. They'll want answers tomorrow, official ones. Reynolds moved closer, keeping his voice low. Whatever you're hiding from whatever happened on Black Mountain, it might be time to trust someone with the truth. Emily finally looked up, meeting his gaze. The last time I trusted someone, my entire team died. Reynolds absorbed this without visible reaction. Miller said you performed battlefield surgery that would challenge most combat surgeons. Said you moved like someone who'd done it 100 times before. I have, Emily admitted softly. Who are you really, Lawson? Emily stared at the medical supplies spread before her, the tools of her true profession. 3 years of hiding, of running from the beast, had culminated in this moment of decision. Reynolds had earned her trust, had shown himself to be an ally rather than a threat. And yet the fear remained. Fear that sharing her secret would only lead to more death. Before she could respond, the door opened again, revealing Miller's exhausted face. Shepard wants all team members from the field operation in his office at 0800 tomorrow, he said. Full debrief. Reynolds nodded. Expected. Miller's gaze lingered on Emily. Whatever happens tomorrow, what you did out there saved that sergeant's life. No one can take that away. After he left, Reynolds sighed. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion clouding your judgment. Emily nodded, knowing sleep would likely elude her. As Reynolds turned to leave, she asked, the sergeant from the field, how is he stable? Expected to recover fully? Reynolds paused at the door. You know, in all my years of military medicine, I've rarely seen work like yours. Wherever you trained, whatever unit you served with, they produced something exceptional. After Reynolds departed, Emily finished her inventory in solitude, each movement mechanical as her mind raced through scenarios and contingencies. Tomorrow would bring confrontation questions she couldn't answer without revealing the truth about Operation Black Mountain and her own identity. But before facing that, there was somewhere she needed to go. Somewhere quiet where she could prepare herself for what was to come. The base chapel stood silent and empty in the late evening hours, its simple wooden pews and modest altar bathed in shadows. Emily sat in the back row, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wasn't praying, not exactly. Faith had abandoned her on that mountainside in Afghanistan, or perhaps she had abandoned it. Either way, she came not for spiritual comfort, but for the chapel's solitude, its status as neutral ground where even military authority stepped lightly. The door opened quietly, admitting a single figure. Miller paused at the entrance, his eyes adjusting to the dimness before he spotted her. "Thought I might find you here," he said, walking slowly down the center aisle. "Mind if I join you?" Emily nodded toward the pew, and Miller sat maintaining a respectful distance. They sat in silence for several minutes before Miller spoke. "I've been a SEAL for 12 years, worked with all kinds of medical personnel, the jokers who use humor to deal with stress, the serious ones who treated every case like life or death, the ambitious ones who wanted to climb the ranks quickly." He turned slightly to face her. "But I've never met anyone like you, someone with the skills of an elite combat surgeon who chooses to hide in plain sight as a basic medic, someone who would rather suppress their abilities than be recognized for them." Emily remained silent, her gaze fixed on the simple wooden cross at the front of the chapel. "What are you afraid of, Lawson?" Miller asked quietly. "Who are you hiding from?" The question hung between them, its weight almost tangible in the chapel's hushed atmosphere. Emily closed her eyes briefly, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed refuge beginning to crumble. "3 years ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I was the lead medical specialist for a Navy SEAL team, Delta Company 3rd Battalion." Miller's breath caught audibly, recognition flickering in his eyes. "The unit that was lost in the Korangal." Emily nodded. "Operation Black Mountain. It was supposed to be a standard high-value target acquisition. Intelligence had located a terrorist leader planning attacks against American forces. We'd done dozens of similar missions." She paused, the memory surfacing with painful clarity. "It was a trap. The intelligence was false, designed to lure us into a prepared ambush. 50 enemy fighters waiting in concealed positions with advanced knowledge of our approach route, our tactics, even our emergency extraction plan." "An intelligence leak," Miller said grimly. "More than a leak," Emily corrected. "A betrayal. Someone with intimate knowledge of our operation deliberately fed information to the enemy." She fell silent again, her hands tightening around the dog tags she'd withdrawn from her pocket, the only personal items she'd kept from her previous life. "We were hit almost immediately," she continued after a moment. "Multiple casualties within the first few minutes. I was moving between positions, treating the wounded, performing emergency procedures under constant fire. For a while, I thought we'd make it. I managed to stabilize everyone, kept them fighting, kept them alive." Miller waited patiently as Emily gathered herself to continue. "Then everything went wrong at once. We ran out of ammunition. Communications were jammed. Enemy forces began closing in from all sides." Her voice became clinical, detached, as if reporting on someone else's experience. "Our team leader made the call for an airstrike on our position. Better a quick death than capture and torture." Miller's expression darkened with understanding. "You had wounded teammates who couldn't be moved quickly enough." Emily nodded, her eyes haunted. 8 wounded men, and I was trying to get them to the extraction point, but I couldn't move them all in time. The airstrike was inbound. I had to choose, save myself or stay, and try to keep them alive until the last possible second. "You stayed," Miller said softly, not a question, but a recognition. "I stayed," Emily confirmed, her voice breaking slightly. "I stayed with them, trying to keep them alive as long as possible. The airstrike hit, killed everyone. My team, the enemy forces. It should have killed me too." She looked down at the dog tags in her hand. "Somehow I survived. A rescue team found me 3 days later, barely alive, buried under rubble. The military gave me medals, told me I was a hero for trying to save them." Her voice hardened. "But I know the truth. 8 good men died because I couldn't save them. 8 men who trusted me to keep them alive." Miller absorbed her story in silence, his expression solemn. "So you disappeared," he finally said. "Transferred to a regular medical unit where you could hide your abilities." "I couldn't bear the thought of being responsible for another special operations team," Emily admitted. "What if my skills failed again? What if more people died because I wasn't good enough?" "What about today?" Miller asked. "That sergeant would have died without your intervention." "That's different," Emily replied. "One critical patient in an emergency situation. Different how you use the same skills, face the same pressure." Emily had no answer for that. The contradiction in her logic hung between them. "Lawson," Miller said carefully, "what happened to your team wasn't because you failed them. It was because someone betrayed your mission." "Maybe," But the outcome is the same. They died. I lived. Did they ever find who leaked the intelligence? Emily shook her head. The investigation stalled. Officially, it was attributed to local informants being compromised. But that doesn't explain how they knew our exact tactics and contingency plans. That had to come from someone with direct knowledge of the operation. Miller leaned forward, his expression intense. So you've been hiding for 3 years, not just from your guilt, but because you don't know who betrayed your team or why. Yes, Emily admitted. And because I don't know if they're still out there, still in a position to do it again. Miller nodded slowly, processing the implications. Have you considered that by hiding, you might be letting them win? That your silence might be protecting whoever was responsible? The chapel door opened again before Emily could respond. Jack Reynolds stood in the entrance, his silhouette outlined by the corridor light. Sorry to interrupt, he said, approaching them quickly, but we've got a situation. Captain Walker has been reviewing security footage from the communications center. He's requesting an immediate meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Shepard about what he found. Emily tensed. What did he find? I don't know the details, Reynolds replied, but he specifically mentioned Operation Black Mountain and asked for your service record to be pulled from classified archives. Miller and Emily exchanged a significant look. If Walker's investigating Black Mountain now, Miller said slowly, after all this time, he either found something new, Reynolds continued, or he's connected to what happened. Emily felt a cold certainty settle over her. Or he was part of it. The possibility hung in the air between them, transforming their understanding of the situation. If Walker was somehow involved in the betrayal that had led to the ambush 3 years ago, then Emily's exposure at Fort Bragg wasn't just a threat to her anonymity, it was potentially a threat to her life. What do we do? Miller asked, looking between Reynolds and Emily. Reynolds straightened, his decision made. We find out what Walker knows and why he's so interested in Lawson and Black Mountain. Before tomorrow's meeting, before he has a chance to control the narrative. How? Emily asked. We can't just break into his office. No, Reynolds agreed. But I still have access to the intelligence archives from my time in special operations. If Walker's been investigating Black Mountain, he's had to access files, make requests. There will be a trail. Miller nodded. I can check with some of my SEAL contacts, see if anyone's been asking unusual questions about Delta Company or Operation Black Mountain recently. Emily looked between the two men, overwhelmed by their immediate willingness to help. Why are you doing this? You're risking your careers, possibly worse. Reynolds' weathered face was solemn. Because I've seen too many good soldiers destroyed by politics and betrayal. Because whatever happened on that mountain, you deserve better than to be abandoned by the system you served. And, Miller added, because anyone willing to sacrifice their own team for personal gain needs to be exposed. For all we know, they're still in position to betray other teams. Emily felt something shift in her. The first stirrings of hope after 3 long years of isolation and fear. Perhaps she didn't have to face this alone after all. Walker's scheduled to meet with Shepard at 0700 tomorrow before our debrief, Reynolds said. That gives us the night to find what we can. We'll rendezvous at the old maintenance shed behind the motor pool at 0600. As they prepared to leave the chapel, Miller paused, turning to Emily. For what it's worth, what I saw today in the field wasn't the work of someone who failed their team. It was the work of someone any soldier would be lucky to have watching over them. Emily tucked the dog tags back into her pocket. 3 years of running, of hiding her true self, had culminated in this moment of decision. Tomorrow would bring either answers or new dangers. But for the first time since Operation Black Mountain, she wasn't facing the threat alone. The pre-dawn air carried a biting chill as Emily made her way toward the designated meeting point. The base was beginning to stir with early morning activity, but the area around the old maintenance shed remained quiet and secluded. She approached cautiously, senses heightened by years of operational training and recent paranoia. Reynolds was already there, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Miller arrived moments later, moving with the silent efficiency characteristic of his SEAL training. Any trouble? Reynolds asked as they gathered in the shadows of the dilapidated structure. Both shook their heads. What did you find? Emily asked. Reynolds produced a small tablet. I accessed the intelligence query logs. Walker has been pulling files related to Operation Black Mountain for the past month. Started right around the time you transferred to this base. Coincidence? Miller asked. I don't believe in those anymore, Emily replied. What specific files was he accessing? Reynolds scrolled through the data. Personnel records for Delta Company, after-action reports, satellite imagery from the operation zone. He paused, his expression darkening, and he was granted special access to CIA field communications from that region during the operation timeframe. CIA involvement wasn't in any official report, Emily said, her suspicion growing. That was deliberately kept separate from our mission parameters. Yet Walker knew to look for it, Reynolds noted, which suggests prior knowledge. Miller produced his own findings. My contact at Naval Special Warfare Command says there's been renewed interest in Black Mountain at high levels. Something about discrepancies in financial tracking related to operations in that region. Money, Emily asked, confused. What does that have to do with our ambush? Maybe nothing, Miller acknowledged, or maybe everything. Many betrayals in war zones trace back to money. Arms deals, drug shipments, resource control. Reynolds nodded grimly. The Korengal Valley has always been a smuggling corridor, valuable routes for everything from weapons to opium. The pieces began to align in Emily's mind, forming a disturbing pattern. Our target that night, the terrorist leader, had recently gained control of several key mountain passes that would be valuable for smuggling. And if someone in intelligence or CIA had a financial stake in those routes, Reynolds began, they might arrange for a competing faction to eliminate a problematic SEAL team, Miller finished. The implications were staggering. Not just a tactical betrayal, but a calculated elimination of American forces to protect illicit financial interests. Emily felt cold fury building within her, replacing the guilt and fear that had dominated her thoughts for 3 years. If Walker's connected to this, she said quietly, then his interest in me isn't just about my cover identity. It's about silencing a witness who might expose the truth. Reynolds checked his watch. Walker meets with Shepard in 30 minutes. We need to decide our next move. Miller's expression was resolute. We take what we know directly to Shepard before Walker can control the narrative. If Walker's involved, he can't be allowed to frame the investigation. And if Shepard's compromised too, Emily asked. Then we go above him, Reynolds replied. I still have contacts at Central Command who would take this very seriously. They agreed on a plan, proceed together to Shepard's office, present their evidence, and request immediate security measures while a full investigation was launched. It was risky, especially with so many unknowns, but far less dangerous than allowing Walker to dictate events. As they prepared to leave, Emily felt a strange calm settle over her. After 3 years of hiding who she really was, she was finally facing the truth of what had happened on that mountain. Whatever came next, vindication or further danger, at least she would no longer be alone. Ready? Miller asked. Emily nodded, straightening her shoulders. Ready. The three moved out of the shadows and toward the administrative buildings, unaware that their meeting had not gone unobserved. From the window of a darkened office overlooking the motor pool, Captain James Walker lowered a pair of high-powered binoculars, his expression hardening as he reached for his secure phone. They know, he said simply when the call connected. Implement containment protocol. Now. As Emily, Miller, and Reynolds made their way across the base, the trap was already closing around them, set by the same ruthless minds that had orchestrated the deaths of Emily's team 3 years earlier. The ghosts of Operation Black Mountain were about to claim new victims unless they could somehow break the cycle of betrayal that had begun on that blood-soaked mountainside in Afghanistan. The final confrontation loomed, bringing with it either long-delayed justice or the completion of a mission that had left only one survivor the first time around. For Emily, the next few hours would determine whether her survival had been mere chance or part of a greater purpose, to finally expose the truth and honor the fallen men whose dog tags she carried close to her heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg as Emily, Miller, and Reynolds approached the administration building. Each step felt weighted with purpose, the culmination of 3 years of questions finally moving toward answers. The base was coming alive around them, shifts changing personnel, moving between buildings, the daily rhythm of military precision, continuing unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. Shepard should be in his office by now, Reynolds said, checking his watch. Walker's meeting is scheduled for 0700. Miller nodded, scanning their surroundings with the practiced vigilance of a combat veteran. We need to get to Shepard before Walker does. Emily remained silent, her senses heightened to every detail around them. Something felt wrong. The morning routine appeared normal, but subtle discrepancies registered in her subconscious. A security patrol passing through an area twice within minutes, communications personnel moving with the unusual urgency, a staff car parked where vehicles typically weren't allowed. "Wait," she said suddenly, halting their advance. "Something's off." Reynolds and Miller stopped immediately, trusting her instincts. "What is it?" Miller asked, his own senses now on high alert. "Security patterns are disrupted," Emily explained quietly. "And look at the communications building. That's the third team I've seen enter in the last 5 minutes." Reynolds scanned the area, his experienced eyes confirming her observations. "She's right. Base is on elevated security status, but there's been no announcement." "Silent alert," Miller concluded grimly. "Someone doesn't want the general population to know." The implications were clear. They had underestimated Walker's awareness of their activities. If he had already implemented security measures, then their approach to Shepard's office was compromised before it began. "We need an alternative," Reynolds said. "If Walker's monitoring standard access points—" "The medical center," Emily suggested. "Shepard conducts morning rounds at the trauma ward every day at 06:30. Standard procedure after casualties arrive." Reynolds nodded. "We can intercept him there, away from administrative oversight. If we split up, we're less conspicuous," Miller added. Different routes rendezvous at the east entrance of the medical center. They separated smoothly, each taking a different path across the base. Emily chose a route through the barracks area, blending with medical personnel reporting for morning duty. Her mind worked furiously, analyzing possibilities and threats. If Walker was truly connected to the betrayal of Operation Black Mountain, then he wasn't just a bureaucratic obstacle. He was a deadly enemy with everything to lose. As she approached the medical center, Emily spotted the distinctive figure of Lieutenant Colonel Shepard entering through the main doors right on schedule. Their window of opportunity was narrow but viable. She altered course slightly, circling around to the east entrance where they had agreed to meet. Reynolds arrived first, his breathing slightly elevated from his brisk pace. Miller appeared moments later, moving with the controlled urgency of a man accustomed to time-sensitive operations. "Shepard just entered," Emily informed them. "He'll start at the critical care unit where yesterday's casualties are being treated." "Let's move," Reynolds said, quickly but calmly, nothing that would trigger security protocols. They entered the medical center, their arrival unremarkable among the morning shift change. Moving purposefully through familiar corridors, they made their way toward the critical care unit, where Shepard would be conducting his review of the wounded soldiers from yesterday's convoy attack. They found him in the recovery ward, examining charts at the foot of the sergeant's bed. The same man whose life Emily had saved with her advanced surgical intervention in the field. Dr. Anderson stood beside him, providing updates on the patient's condition. Shepard looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from professional focus to surprised wariness. "This is unexpected," he said, handing the chart back to Anderson. "I believe we have a scheduled debrief at 0800. "Sir," Reynolds began, keeping his voice low, "we need to speak with you privately. It's urgent and concerns base security." Shepard's eyes narrowed, assessing the three of them with the calculating precision of a career officer. After a moment's consideration, he nodded sharply. "Dr. Anderson, please continue the rounds without me. I'll catch up shortly." He led them to a small consultation room off the main ward, closing the door firmly behind them. "This better be important enough to interrupt official medical rounds, Reynolds." "It's about Operation Black Mountain, sir," Reynolds replied without preamble, "and about Captain Walker's investigation into Specialist Lawson." Shepard's expression remained carefully neutral, but Emily detected a subtle tension in his posture. "Explain." Miller stepped forward. "Sir, we have reason to believe Captain Walker's interest in Specialist Lawson goes beyond standard security protocols. He's been accessing classified files related to Operation Black Mountain, specifically CIA communications that weren't part of the official record." "And why would that concern you?" Shepard asked, his gaze shifting to Emily. "Unless Specialist Lawson has some connection to that operation that isn't reflected in her service record." The moment of truth had arrived. Emily straightened, meeting Shepard's gaze directly. "Sir, my name is Dr. Emily Lawson. 3 years ago, I was the lead medical specialist for SEAL Team Delta Company 3rd Battalion. I was the sole survivor of Operation Black Mountain." Shepard's expression remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "That operation is classified, Doctor. All personnel were reported killed in action." "Not all, sir," Emily corrected quietly. I survived the airstrike, but was buried in rubble for 3 days before rescue arrived. After recovery, I was given a new identity and reassigned to standard medical duties at my request. At your request? Shepard repeated skeptically. I suffered from severe PTSD and survivor's guilt, Emily explained. But more importantly, I believed then, and have growing evidence now, that Operation Black Mountain was not a simple intelligence failure. Our team was deliberately betrayed by someone with intimate knowledge of our mission parameters. That's a serious accusation, Doctor, Shepard said, his tone measured. What evidence do you have? Reynolds produced his tablet displaying the intelligence query logs. Captain Walker has been systematically accessing files related to Black Mountain since shortly before Dr. Lawson's transfer to this base, including CIA field communications that weren't part of the official operation documentation. And my contacts at Naval Special Warfare Command confirm renewed interest in the operation, Miller added, specifically related to financial irregularities in the region during that time period. Shepard absorbed this information with the disciplined composure of a veteran commander. And you believe Walker is somehow connected to the original betrayal? The timing and nature of his investigation suggests prior knowledge, Reynolds said. At minimum, he's pursuing this with unusual personal interest. And now the base is under silent security alert, Emily added, without official notification or apparent cause. Shepard moved to the window, looking out at the base with thoughtful concentration. After a long moment, he turned back to face them. I've had my own concerns about Walker for some time, he admitted. His assignment to Fort Bragg came through unusual channels with directives that bypassed standard command review. Emily felt a surge of cautious hope. Shepard wasn't dismissing their concerns outright. Furthermore, Shepard continued, certain communications have been rerouted through his office that should have come directly to me. Nothing explicitly suspicious, but enough to warrant attention. Sir, Miller said, with respect, we believe Walker is aware of our investigation. The heightened security measures suggest he's already moving to contain potential threats to whatever he's involved in. Shepard nodded, decision crystallizing in his expression. Reynolds, contact your Central Command connections immediately. We need external oversight before this escalates further. Miller, secure this facility. I want trusted personnel on all access points. He turned to Emily. Dr. Lawson, I need you to document everything you remember about Operation Black Mountain, particularly any unusual communications or interactions before the mission. Details you might have dismissed as insignificant at the time could be crucial now. The rapid shift from suspicion to decisive action confirmed Emily's impression of Shepard as a commander who valued truth and accountability above bureaucratic protocol. What about Walker? She asked. I'll handle Walker, Shepard replied grimly. Our scheduled meeting provides the perfect opportunity to assess his true agenda while keeping him contained. As they prepared to implement their respective tasks, the door to the consultation room burst open. Dr. Anderson stood in the doorway, his face tight with urgency. Sir Captain Walker is in the building with a security team. They're demanding immediate access to all areas and personnel records. Shepard's expression darkened. On whose authority? He claims to have direct orders from Central Command regarding a security breach, Anderson replied. They're starting with the critical care ward. The implications were immediately clear. Walker was moving more aggressively than anticipated, and his focus on the critical care ward, where the sergeant Emily had saved was recovering, suggested he was gathering evidence of her advanced medical skills. Change of plans, Shepard said briskly. Reynolds, get to communications and make that call immediately. Miller, find Turner. He witnessed Lawson's field procedures and could corroborate our concerns. He turned to Emily. You should not be found here. Anderson, get her to the secondary medical bunker. Restricted access, official patients only. As they moved to execute these new directives, the hospital PA system crackled to life. Attention all personnel. Security lockdown in effect. Remain at your stations. This is not a drill. He's sealing the base, Miller said grimly. Standard containment protocol. Shepard's jaw tightened. Move now. Rendezvous at the command bunker at 1200 hours if possible. If not, implement crisis protocol Cobalt 7. They separated quickly, each moving with purpose toward their assigned objectives. Emily followed Anderson through a service corridor, her mind racing. Walker was moving faster and more overtly than expected, suggesting either confidence in his position or desperation to contain the situation. Neither possibility boded well for their chances of exposing the truth. The secondary medical bunker lay beneath the main hospital, a hardened facility designed to continue operations during attacks or natural disasters. Access required specific clearance limiting Walker's ability to search the area without drawing unwanted attention from higher command. Anderson led Emily through the reinforced doors, nodding to the security officer on duty. "Routine inspection of emergency supplies," he explained smoothly. "Dr. Lawson will be assisting me." Once inside, Anderson secured the inner door and turned to Emily. "This buys us maybe 30 minutes before Walker figures out you're here." "What's the play?" Emily was momentarily surprised by Anderson's immediate cooperation. "You're helping me without question." Anderson's expression was professionally detached but determined. "I've worked with enough surgeons to recognize elite training when I see it. Whatever you did to that sergeant in the field saved his life when conventional procedures would have failed. That tells me all I need to know about your character." He crossed to a secure medical cabinet, entering a code to reveal not standard supplies, but communications equipment. Shepard had this installed last year after the communications center was compromised during a cyber attack. Direct line to Central Command bypasses base systems entirely. Emily's estimation of both Anderson and Shepard rose significantly. They had been preparing contingencies for a security breach long before her arrival. "Reynolds will be attempting to reach his contacts," Emily said, "but having a backup channel improves our odds." Anderson nodded, activating the system. "What's our message and who's it going to?" Emily considered carefully. After 3 years of isolation, trust didn't come easily. But half measures now would only endanger them all. "General Michael Harrington's Special Operations Command," she decided. "Authentication code, November Echo Sierra 47 Tango Alpha." Anderson raised an eyebrow but entered the information without comment. The system hummed to life, establishing a secure connection through military satellites rather than ground-based networks. "While we wait," Anderson said, "I should check on the sergeant. His recovery could provide critical evidence of your advanced training, if it comes to that." "Be careful," Emily warned. "If Walker suspects you're involved, he won't hesitate to detain you." Anderson's expression hardened. "I've served in 3 combat zones, Doctor. I know how to handle myself around threats, even ones wearing friendly uniforms." After Anderson departed, Emily found herself alone in the secure bunker, surrounded by emergency medical supplies and communications equipment. The enforced solitude gave her first opportunity to fully process the rapid developments of the past 24 hours. After 3 years of hiding who she truly was, events had accelerated beyond her control. Her cover was blown. Her real identity would soon be known throughout the chain of command. And somewhere on this base, the person responsible for the deaths of her teammates was actively hunting her. Emily moved to the medical supplies, automatically checking and organizing equipment, a habit formed through years of combat preparation. The familiar routine helped calm her thoughts, allowing her to analyze the situation with clinical detachment. If Walker was indeed connected to the betrayal of Operation Black Mountain, his aggressive response suggested not just concern about exposure, but actual fear. That fear could make him dangerous, but it also revealed vulnerability. He wouldn't be moving so boldly unless he felt truly threatened by what she might reveal. The communications console chimed, indicating an incoming secure transmission. Emily moved quickly to accept it, but instead of General Harrington's authorization code, the screen displayed a simple text message. "Black Mountain compromised at highest levels. Trust no one outside your immediate circle. Evidence secured at Atlas Point. Authorization Delta 37." Emily stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Delta 37 was the personal authentication code of Commander James Cooper, her team leader from Operation Black Mountain, a man officially listed as killed in action 3 years ago. Before she could process this staggering implication, the bunker door hissed open. Emily turned sharply, expecting Anderson's return, but found Captain Walker standing in the doorway, instead flanked by 2 armed security officers. "Dr. Emily Lawson," Walker said, a cold smile spreading across his face. "The ghost of Black Mountain. I've been looking for you for a very long time." Across the base, Jack Reynolds moved through the communications building with the confident stride of a senior officer conducting routine business. His decades of service had taught him the most effective disguise was often no disguise at all, simply the appearance of belonging exactly where you were. He nodded to personnel as he passed, making his way to a secure communications terminal in a less trafficked section of the facility. Walker's security measures were focused on controlling movement in and out of the base, not monitoring internal communications by trusted staff. Reynolds activated the terminal, entering his senior medical officer credentials. The system granted him access, but with restrictions, another sign of Walker's influence spreading through base operations. He bypassed the standard channels instead, accessing an emergency protocol designed for medical evacuation coordination. Typing rapidly, Reynolds composed a coded message to his contact at Central Command. Medical Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha, requiring immediate specialist consultation on Black Mountain Syndrome. Authentication, Sierra Romeo 95 Whiskey. The outdated authentication code would alert his contact that something was seriously wrong at Fort Bragg, while the reference to Black Mountain Syndrome would direct attention to the specific operation without explicitly naming it on potentially compromised channels. As he sent the transmission, Reynolds became aware of increased activity in the corridor outside. Security personnel moving with purpose, checking credentials with unusual thoroughness. Walker's net was tightening. Reynolds cleared the terminal history and stood to leave, maintaining the unhurried demeanor of a senior officer completing routine tasks. He had nearly reached the exit when a security team entered, led by a stern-faced lieutenant. "Sir, I need to see your authorization for accessing secure communications," the lieutenant demanded. Reynolds produced his credentials calmly. "Standard medical coordination, Lieutenant. I have patients from yesterday's convoy attack requiring specialized treatment approvals." The lieutenant examined the credentials carefully before returning them. "Sir Captain Walker has implemented Security Protocol Alpha 2. All non-essential personnel are confined to quarters until further notice." "I'm Chief Medical Officer for Trauma Services, son," Reynolds replied, injecting just the right amount of senior officer irritation into his voice. "Medical coordination during patient recovery is essential by any definition." The lieutenant hesitated, military discipline warring with security protocols. "Yes, sir. However, I'm required to escort all personnel back to their designated areas." "Fine," Reynolds agreed, recognizing the wisdom of compliance for now. "I need to check on my patients anyway." As the lieutenant escorted him from the communications building, Reynolds maintained his composure despite the growing certainty that Walker's operation was moving faster than they had anticipated. Whether his message had reached Central Command in time remained to be seen. In another section of the base, Nathan Miller moved with tactical precision through service corridors, avoiding main thoroughfares where Walker's security teams would be concentrated. His objective was clear: locate Specialist Turner, who had witnessed Emily's advanced surgical procedures in the field and could corroborate their claims about her true identity and skills. Miller found Turner in the medical supply warehouse, inventorying field kits with several other medics. Catching the young specialist's eye, Miller gestured subtly for him to step aside. "Sir," Turner asked when they had moved to a private corner, "is this about the convoy operation? I've prepared my report for the debrief." "Something more important," Miller replied quietly. "What you witnessed in the field yesterday? Dr. Lawson's surgical intervention. I need you to document it in detail. Not just what she did, but how she did it." Turner's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking about that, sir. Those weren't standard field procedures. The way she isolated that secondary arterial bleed. That's advanced trauma surgery, way beyond combat medic training." "Exactly," Miller confirmed. "Your observations could be crucial evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Investigation into what?" Turner asked, his youthful face reflecting growing concern. Miller weighed how much to reveal versus the need for operational security. Specialist Lawson isn't who her records claim she is. Her true identity and the operation she was involved in 3 years ago are classified at the highest levels. Turner absorbed this with surprising composure. "That explains a lot, sir. The way she handled herself under fire wasn't standard medic behavior either. She had command presence." "I need you to write down everything you observed in detail," Miller instructed. "Then secure that documentation somewhere Walker's security teams won't find it." "Captain Walker," Turner asked, confused, "why would base security be interested in a field medic's procedures?" "Because some people are very invested in keeping certain truths buried," Miller replied grimly, "and they're willing to go to extreme lengths to ensure those truths stay hidden." Understanding dawned in Turner's eyes. "This is bigger than a personnel issue, isn't it?" "Much bigger," Miller confirmed. "Potentially treason big." Turner straightened his expression resolute. I'll document everything, sir, and I'll make sure it's secure. Good man, Miller said, clapping him briefly on the shoulder. When you're done, find somewhere to lay low. If anyone asks about yesterday's operation, stick to basic facts only. As Turner moved to comply with these instructions, the warehouse doors burst open. A security team entered, weapons at ready positions. Attention all personnel, the team leader announced. By order of Captain Walker, this facility is now under lockdown. Everyone is to remain in place for security screening. Miller caught Turner's eye one last time, giving a subtle nod. The young specialist acknowledged with an almost imperceptible dip of his head before moving back to join the other medics. Miller turned to face the advancing security team, his mind already calculating options. If he was detained now, their chances of exposing Walker diminished significantly. But creating an incident would only accelerate the security crackdown. Sometimes the best tactical approach was the simplest one. Miller stepped forward, presenting his credentials with confident authority. Sergeant Miller Seal, Medical Liaison. I'm conducting inventory verification following yesterday's field deployment. Standard procedure after combat utilization of medical supplies. The team leader examined his credentials carefully. Sir, all personnel are required to report to their quarters immediately. Understood, Miller replied easily. Just need to sign off on this inventory first. Chain of custody requirements. The security team's attention was diverted by a crash from the far end of the warehouse. A shelf of supplies toppling over as a flustered medic apologized profusely for his clumsiness. Miller recognized Turner's deliberate distraction immediately. Let me help with them, Miller called, moving toward the disruption before the security team could object. The momentary confusion provided exactly the opening he needed. While the security team was focused on controlling the situation with the fallen supplies, Miller slipped through a side exit, disappearing into the maze of service corridors that honeycombed the base. His immediate objective was clear: reach the command bunker and rendezvous with Shepard as planned. If Emily and Reynolds could do the same, they still had a chance to coordinate their evidence and expose Walker before his security lockdown became impenetrable. In the secondary medical bunker, Emily faced Captain Walker with the calm focus that had served her through countless life-threatening situations. The armed security officers flanking him maintained professional expressions, but their body language suggested tension. These weren't men fully briefed on the nature of their assignment. Captain Walker, she acknowledged evenly, this seems like an excessive response to a routine medical inspection. Walker's smile remained cold, calculating. Let's dispense with the pretense, shall we, Doctor? We both know there's nothing routine about your presence at Fort Bragg. He stepped further into the bunker, gesturing for the security officers to remain at the entrance. 3 years, he continued. 3 years I've been searching for the survivor of Operation Black Mountain, the loose end that needed tying up. Is that what I am to you? Emily asked, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. A loose end. You were supposed to die with the others, Walker said, his pretense of professional detachment slipping slightly. The airstrike was specifically calibrated to ensure complete elimination of all personnel in the target zone. The casual confirmation of his involvement in the betrayal sent a surge of cold fury through Emily's veins. This man had deliberately arranged the deaths of 8 elite operators, her friends, her teammates. Why, she demanded, what could possibly justify betraying your own country's special forces? Walker's expression hardened. You have no concept of the bigger picture, Doctor. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for strategic objectives. What strategic objective required murdering an entire SEAL team? Emily pressed her mind, racing to keep him talking while she assessed options for escape or confrontation. Walker moved toward the communications console, noting the active, secure channel with narrowed eyes. Your team discovered something they weren't supposed to see: a cooperative arrangement between certain intelligence assets and regional power brokers. An arrangement that facilitated valuable intelligence gathering at the cost of allowing some entrepreneurial activities. The euphemisms barely disguised the truth. Her team had stumbled upon evidence of American intelligence officers cooperating with drug traffickers, likely sharing in the profits while claiming strategic necessity. You sold out American soldiers for drug money, Emily said flatly, her disgust evident. Walker's expression flashed with anger. I secured intelligence channels that saved hundreds of American lives. The financing methods were irrelevant compared to the intelligence value. And when my team discovered these financing methods, they became expendable. They became a liability, Walker corrected coldly, one that could have compromised years of carefully cultivated intelligence networks. Emily watched him closely, noting his position relative to the security officers at the door. They appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the conversation, suggesting they hadn't been fully briefed on Walker's true objectives. "And now," she asked, "what's your plan? Kill everyone who knows about Black Mountain all over again." Reynolds Miller. Shepard. "That's a lot of bodies to explain, Captain." Walker's smile returned, confident and chilling. "Nothing so dramatic, Doctor. You'll be detained as a security risk, a mentally unstable former operative suffering from severe PTSD, manufacturing, conspiracy theories to explain your own failures in the field. Your friends will be reassigned to remote postings where their claims will find no audience." He gestured to the communications console. "Who were you contacting? Your message won't reach them. All communications are being monitored and intercepted." Emily's thoughts flashed to the message she had received, not from General Harrington, but supposedly from Commander Cooper, a man officially dead for 3 years. If Cooper had somehow survived as well, "You seem very confident for someone whose operation is already compromised," she said, watching Walker's reaction carefully. His expression flickered briefly with uncertainty. "What do you mean Operation Black Mountain wasn't just a SEAL mission?" Emily said, building on her advantage. "It was part of a larger intelligence gathering operation. Did you really think you were the only one with access to the complete file?" Walker's confidence wavered visibly. "You're bluffing. All oversight was compartmentalized. No one had the complete picture except my team." "Then why has Atlas Point been activated?" Emily asked, using the code name from the mysterious message she'd received. The effect was immediate. Walker's face drained of color. "That's impossible. Atlas Point was decommissioned after Black Mountain." Emily pressed her advantage, moving slightly to position herself better relative to the exit. 3 years is a long time, Captain. Long enough for some people to gather evidence, build cases, prepare contingencies. Did you really think everyone you betrayed would conveniently stay dead?" Walker's composure cracked further. He turned to the security officers. "Secure the prisoner. Maximum restrictions. No communications, no visitors." The officers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. "Sir," one began cautiously, "our orders were to locate and escort Arthur Lawson to Lieutenant Colonel Shepard for questioning regarding security protocols." "I'm countermanding those orders," Walker snapped. "This is now a Central Command priority." "Then we'll need confirmation from Central Command." "Sir," the officer replied, his training overriding immediate obedience when faced with conflicting directives. Walker's expression darkened with barely contained fury. "You dare question my authority, Lieutenant?" The standoff was interrupted by the bunker's communications console chiming loudly. All eyes turned to the screen where a new message had appeared. "Security Protocol Override Alpha 1. All Fort Bragg personnel, Captain James Walker is hereby relieved of duty, pending investigation. Authentication code, Sierra Tango Command Actual." The code represented the highest level of Central Command authorization. The security officers immediately straightened their training kicking in as they processed this dramatic shift in the command structure. Walker stared at the screen in disbelief. "That's impossible. The communications network is locked down." "Apparently not completely," Emily observed, allowing herself a small measure of relief. Reynolds had succeeded in reaching his contacts at Central Command. The security officers turned their attention to Walker professional training, overtaking personal loyalty. "Sir, we need to escort you to headquarters for verification of this order." Walker's hand moved toward his sidearm, a motion that triggered immediate response from both officers. "Captain," one warned sharply, "do not force us to take action." For a moment, the bunker balanced on a knife's edge of potential violence. Then Walker's training reasserted itself. Whatever his crimes, he was still a military officer who understood chain of command and tactical reality. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, his options were limited. "This isn't over," he said to Emily, his voice low and menacing. "You have no idea how deep this goes or who's involved. They'll bury you all over again, and this time they'll make sure you stay buried." As the security officers escorted Walker from the bunker, Emily finally allowed herself to exhale fully. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but Walker's parting words carried a chilling truth. If Operation Black Mountain had indeed involved corruption at the highest levels of intelligence services, then this was only the opening move in a much larger and more dangerous game. She turned back to the communications console, studying the message that had saved her. The authorization code was legitimate, but something about the timing felt too convenient, too perfectly orchestrated. Reynolds was good, but arranging a command-level security override within hours stretched credibility. Someone else was involved. Someone with significant authority and access. Perhaps the same someone who had sent the message about Atlas Point and Commander Cooper. The bunker door opened again, revealing Dr. Anderson, with Lieutenant Colonel Shepard and Miller close behind him. "Dr. Lawson," Shepard greeted her formally. "I see our timing was fortuitous." "Walker's been detained," Emily confirmed. "But I don't think this is over." "Far from it," Shepard agreed grimly. "Central Command has authorized a full investigation into Operation Black Mountain and all personnel connected to it. The security lockdown has been countermanded, but we're maintaining elevated alert status." Miller moved to Emily's side, his expression reflecting professional concern rather than personal relief. "Reynolds, still securing additional evidence from his contacts," Shepard replied. "He'll join us at the command center when he's finished." Emily gestured to the communications console. Someone sent a message about Atlas Point, a reference only someone familiar with Operation Black Mountain would know. Shepard's expression remained carefully neutral. "We can discuss that at the command center. This location isn't secure for that level of classified information." Something in his tone triggered Emily's instincts. "Atlas Point was the extraction coordinates for Operation Black Mountain," she said, watching Shepard closely. "A contingency location only known to team members and mission command." "As I said, Doctor," Shepard repeated with subtle emphasis, "we should continue this discussion in a more secure location." Emily caught the warning in his eyes. He was trying to tell her something without speaking explicitly. Miller had noticed too, his posture shifting subtly into a more alert stance. "Of course," Emily agreed, gathering her composure. "Lead the way, Colonel." As they prepared to leave the bunker, Anderson handed Emily a small tablet. "The sergeant's latest scans," he explained for the benefit of any potential observers. "Remarkable recovery considering the extent of his injuries." Emily accepted the tablet, glancing down to find not medical scans, but a brief text message. "Communications compromise. Walker not acting alone. Trust no one outside this room." She met Anderson's gaze with newfound respect, passing the tablet to Miller, who absorbed the warning with a nearly imperceptible nod. Whatever victory they had achieved in detaining Walker was merely the first step in exposing a conspiracy that clearly extended far beyond a single corrupt officer. As they left the bunker, Emily felt the weight of the past 3 years, the grief, the guilt, the isolation, begin to transform into something else: determination. For the first time since waking up as the sole survivor of Operation Black Mountain, she had allies, evidence, and a clear purpose. Walker had made a critical error in his pursuit of her, revealing not just his own involvement, but the existence of a larger conspiracy. Now that conspiracy was exposed, vulnerable, and Emily Lawson, the ghost of Black Mountain, was no longer running from her past. She was hunting it. The command center hummed with controlled urgency as senior officers coordinated the security response to Walker's detention and the emerging investigation. Emily, Miller, and Anderson had been sequestered in a secure briefing room adjacent to the main operations floor, where Shepard was currently engaged in communication with Central Command representatives. Reynolds joined them shortly after their arrival, his weathered face reflecting both exhaustion and grim satisfaction. "Walker's being transported to a secure facility for interrogation," he reported. "Central Command has assigned a special investigative team with counterintelligence authority." "How did you manage to get such a rapid response?" Emily asked. Reynolds smiled slightly. "I didn't. By the time my message reached my contact, the override order was already being processed. Someone with significant authority had flagged Walker's activities before we even made our move." "The same someone who sent the message about Atlas Point," Miller suggested. "Possibly," Reynolds acknowledged, though that reference raises more questions than it answers. Emily shared her encounter with Walker, including his inadvertent confirmation of his involvement in betraying Operation Black Mountain and his reaction to the mention of Atlas Point. He was genuinely shocked, she concluded. Whatever he thought he knew about the operation, Atlas Point wasn't part of it. Which suggests compartmentalization, Miller analyzed. Walker was part of the betrayal, but not the architect. The door opened as Shepard entered, his expression grave. Central Command has authorized me to brief you on classified information relevant to the current situation, he announced formally. What I'm about to share is designated top secret with extreme prejudice. He activated the room's security protocols, electronic countermeasures humming to life around them. Once satisfied, Shepard turned to face them directly. 3 years ago, intelligence suggested Operation Black Mountain was compromised before it began. Someone with access to mission parameters sold information to hostile forces in the region. What wasn't clear at the time was who was responsible or why. Shepard called up a secure file on the briefing room's display. Subsequent investigation revealed financial irregularities connected to regional drug trafficking operations. Money moving through channels typically reserved for intelligence assets. But the investigation stalled when key witnesses disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. Emily felt a surge of anger at the clinical description of what had been for her the most devastating experience of her life. 8 good men died because of greed, she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. And the people responsible have spent 3 years covering their tracks while I've been hiding under a false identity. Not exactly, Shepard corrected carefully. Someone has been building a case, gathering evidence, connecting dots. Someone with the patience and resources to play a very long game. He brought up another file, this one heavily redacted, but with one name clearly visible, Commander James Cooper. Emily stared at the file in disbelief. Cooper died in the airstrike. I was with him when it hit. His body was never recovered, Shepard said. And 6 months after Operation Black Mountain, intelligence assets began reporting a ghost operative working through the same region, systematically targeting individuals connected to the ambush. The implications were staggering. If Cooper had somehow survived— Atlas Point, Emily whispered, the pieces beginning to align. It was an emergency extraction point, but also a supply cache. Medical equipment, communications weapons. Shepard nodded. Satellite surveillance detected activity at that location approximately 1 week after the operation. By the time a reconnaissance team arrived, the cache had been accessed and specific items removed. Items that would be useful to someone injured but determined to survive, Miller observed. Exactly, Shepard confirmed. And over the following months, key figures involved in the ambush began to disappear or turn up dead. Professional work typically attributed to rival factions or tribal disputes. Emily struggled to process these revelations. Are you saying Cooper survived and has spent 3 years conducting a personal revenge operation? Not just revenge, Reynolds interjected. Intelligence gathering, building a case. The message you received mentioned evidence secured at Atlas Point. If Cooper is alive and has been collecting evidence against everyone involved in betraying the mission, Miller reasoned, that would explain Walker's aggressive response to your appearance at Fort Bragg. You weren't just a loose end. You were potentially a link to Cooper. Shepard's expression remained carefully neutral. Central Command has authorized a special operations team to investigate Atlas Point. If evidence exists they're implicating personnel at the highest levels of intelligence services, the political fallout will be significant. And if Cooper is alive, Emily asked the question that had been building since the first mysterious message arrived. Then he's been operating without authorization for 3 years, Shepard replied. Technically, that makes him a rogue operative. Officially, Central Command would be obligated to apprehend him. The unspoken implication hung in the air. Unofficially, Cooper might be the key to exposing a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of intelligence services. A conspiracy that had already demonstrated its willingness to sacrifice American soldiers to protect its interests. Before the discussion could continue, the briefing room's secure communication system activated. A message appeared on the main display: Atlas Point coordinates transmitting, authentication Delta 37, eyes only Dr. Emily Lawson. The room fell silent as everyone processed this direct communication from someone using Commander Cooper's authentication code, specifically requesting Emily's involvement. Shepard was the first to recover. Central Command will want to handle this through official channels. With respect, sir, Miller interjected, if Cooper is alive and has been gathering evidence for 3 years, he's unlikely to trust official channels. Not after what happened to his team. He trusts Dr. Lawson, Reynolds observed, or he wouldn't be reaching out specifically to her. All eyes turned to Emily, who had remained focused on the message display. After 3 years of running from her past, from the memories of that failed mission and her lost teammates, the path forward had suddenly become crystal clear. "I'll go," she said simply. "Cooper was my commanding officer. If he's alive, if he has evidence about who betrayed our team and why, I owe it to the men who died to help bring that evidence to light." Shepard studied her carefully. "You understand this would be an unofficial operation. Central Command cannot officially sanction direct contact with a potentially rogue operator." "I understand," Emily confirmed. "You won't go alone," Miller declared firmly. "I have the training and experience for this type of operation." Reynolds nodded in agreement. "And I have contacts who can provide necessary resources without official requisition trails." Shepard considered their impromptu volunteer force with the calculating precision of a veteran commander. "I can give you 48 hours before I'm required to report these coordinates to Central Command. After that, official protocols will take precedence." 48 hours is sufficient, Emily said, her medical training allowing her to calculate time and distance with precision. "The coordinates place Atlas Point within 6 hours travel from our current location." Shepard nodded decisively. "Then it's settled. Dr. Anderson and I will manage the official investigation into Walker's activities here, providing cover for your operation. Reynolds will coordinate resources and communications. Miller and Dr. Lawson will proceed to Atlas Point to secure whatever evidence may exist and, if possible, make contact with Cooper." As the group began discussing operational details, Emily felt a strange sense of completion forming within her. 3 years ago, she had failed to save her team. Now she had the opportunity to ensure their deaths weren't meaningless, to expose the corruption that had sacrificed them and prevent similar betrayals in the future. The ghost of Black Mountain was about to emerge from the shadows, not as a hunted survivor, but as an agent of long-delayed justice. Whatever awaited at Atlas Point, evidence, vindication, or perhaps even a commander she had believed dead, Emily Lawson was finally ready to face it. For the first time since waking up in that field hospital 3 years ago, she felt something that had long been absent from her life: hope. 6 months later, Emily Lawson stood before a classroom of medical trainees at Fort Bragg's newly established Advanced Combat Medical Training Center. The facility, created with direct authorization from Central Command, represented the military's renewed commitment to elite medical training for special operations support personnel. As the center's commanding officer, Emily had transformed from a hidden survivor to a respected leader, her true credentials and experience not only acknowledged but celebrated. The advanced surgical techniques that she had once concealed were now the foundation of a curriculum designed to save more lives in the most challenging combat environments. "The difference between standard field medicine and what you'll learn here," she explained to the attentive trainees, "isn't just technical knowledge. It's the ability to make impossible decisions under the worst possible conditions and to live with the consequences of those decisions." Her gaze swept the room, noting familiar faces among the staff. Nathan Miller had accepted a position as tactical operations instructor, bringing his SEAL experience to the program. Jack Reynolds, though officially retired, remained as a senior advisor, his decades of experience proving invaluable in designing realistic training scenarios. "Some of you have already served in combat zones," Emily continued. "You've experienced the reality of battlefield medicine. Limited resources, hostile conditions, impossible choices. What we teach here won't make those challenges disappear, but it will give you every possible advantage in facing them." As she concluded the orientation session, Emily noticed a figure watching from the back of the classroom. Lieutenant Colonel Shepard, now promoted to full colonel, following the successful resolution of the Walker investigation. "Colonel," she acknowledged as the trainees filed out. "This is an unexpected honor." Shepard nodded, waiting until they were alone before speaking. "The program is exceeding expectations, Dr. Lawson. Central Command is impressed with the preliminary results." "The trainees are exceptional," Emily replied. "They're absorbing advanced techniques faster than we anticipated." "That's not why I'm here," Shepard said, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "I wanted to deliver this personally." He handed her a sealed folder bearing the highest security classifications. "The final report on Operation Black Mountain has been completed. All individuals involved in the betrayal have been identified and appropriate action taken." Emily accepted the folder with steady hands, though her heart raced at the culmination of 6 months of intensive investigation. The evidence secured at Atlas Point had indeed proven decisive, leading to the exposure and arrest of multiple high-ranking intelligence officers involved in the drug trafficking operation that had necessitated the elimination of her SEAL team. "And Cooper?" she asked quietly. Shepard's expression remained professionally neutral. "Commander Cooper's status remains officially classified. His actions following Operation Black Mountain, while technically outside protocol, have been recognized as instrumental in exposing corruption at the highest levels." The careful phrasing told Emily everything she needed to know without explicitly confirming what both of them knew. Cooper had survived, had spent 3 years meticulously building a case against those responsible for betraying his team, and had been granted a form of unofficial amnesty in exchange for his evidence. "Thank you, Colonel," Emily said simply. Shepard nodded, understanding the gratitude extended far beyond the delivery of the report. His support during the critical early days of the investigation, his willingness to allow the unofficial mission to Atlas Point, had been instrumental in achieving justice for the fallen members of Operation Black Mountain. "You've built something important here, Doctor," Shepard observed, gesturing to the training facility around them. "Something that honors your fallen teammates while ensuring other soldiers have better odds of survival." After Shepard departed, Emily returned to her office, the sealed report secure in her hands. On her desk sat a framed photograph, the only personal item displayed in the otherwise professional space. 8 men in combat gear smiling despite the dust and exhaustion evident on their faces. Her team from Operation Black Mountain, photographed just days before their final mission. Beside the photograph lay a set of dog tags, not her own, but those of Commander James Cooper, delivered to her through untraceable channels following the successful conclusion of the investigation. Their presence represented not just the past she had finally reconciled, but a promise for the future. The ghost of Black Mountain had emerged from the shadows, transforming personal tragedy into a mission that would save countless lives in the years to come. The advanced medical training program she now led would ensure that other teams, other soldiers would have better odds of survival in the unforgiving environments where American forces operated. Emily touched the dog tags briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the journey that had brought her here. Then she turned her attention to the new training schedule on her computer screen. There was work to be done, lives to be saved, a legacy to be built. And for the first time in 3 years, she faced that future not as a survivor burdened by guilt, but as a leader empowered by purpose. The shadows of the past would always remain, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they had become the foundation upon which she built something meaningful, a tribute to fallen comrades that would save lives for generations to come. Emily Lawson, once the ghost of Black Mountain, had finally found her way home.